wasting more of our time, I'm going to bring up now Kristina to come and talk to us about neurodivergence. Let's welcome Kristina with, lovely emojis like we normally do, sound emoji and all. Let's do that right away. Welcome.
Thank you. This is fun. That music, I agree with Karen there. It's very helpful. Thank you all so much for attending. I really appreciate it. And I hope this is quite beneficial for you all. And let me see if I can get my screen to share here. We'll get rolling. There we go. You all can see it, right? We good? Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kristina Rogers, and welcome to my session from Neurodivergent for Neurodivergent. So we're here in this session. It's, as you can see here, it's all about helping yourself and helping others, depending whether you're a neurodivergent designer yourself or you are maybe neurotypical, but you're wanting to design or needing to design for neurodivergent folks. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today are 5 tools that will help you if you're a neurodivergent designer. But I'm also going to share what I consider 5 must-haves to make the learning neurodivergent inclusive. Oh. I'm sorry, my screen just suddenly stopped moving. There we go. Technology is fun. All right. So if you're here, I'm going to guess it's because you've been or currently being impacted by neurodiversity in some capacity. So one of the messages I want to make sure you get across is that you are definitely not alone in this. And perhaps you're wondering at this point going, why me? Why this topic? So quick rundown. I'm a learning and development professional. I've done instructional design work now for a decade, but I also have ADHD. And in the journey of being diagnosed and finding ways to manage my symptoms, I've been educating myself on it. And it's been very interesting because that very personal world very much collided with my L&D world. And I will show you in that. This is my brain. So this is a SPECT image scan that I had done with the Amen Clinic. There's originally 4 images, but I'm only going to show you 2. So these images are showing my brain at rest. And what you see on the left, that scan is supposed to, for a neurotypical brain, supposed to be nice and smooth all the way around. As you can see, mine is not. Mine has a lot of lumps. Okay, it has to do with development. And the scan on the right is the activity that's occurring in the brain. So as I said, this image is my brain at rest. I should not be having a lot of things firing, but I am. And it's disproportionate and it's all over the place. And so that kind of, among other things, kind of, hint to you that there's definitely, this is not your neurotypical brain here. What basically this did is spur me to learn about my brain. Why does it work like this? Why did it develop this way? And in that process, I learned that 1, there's no easy solution. Okay, life is complex. And so there's not like this magic pill out there that, you can take care of this or some magical surgery. But what I've learned is there's many pieces to this puzzle to help myself work better. And so wanting to learn more, I found out different resources out there. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, was pretty much like the first one that really pushed me in that direction. Please feel free to read it. She's a Stanford professor, and she has done studies, and she consolidates it into this book. And this is where that term growth mindset was coined from, is from Carol Dweck. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. I've also read up on many things from Dr. Hollowell of Attitude Magazine. He's a forerunner also when it comes to ADHD and aspects of neurodiversity. And oddly enough, I learned as of yesterday, amazingly, this Harvard psychiatrist professor by the name of Dr. Chris Palmer, he has discovered for neurodiverse people, it tends to be the root cause has to do with a metabolic issue in the brain. So the metabolism through blood flow of bringing oxygen and nutrients to the cells to create brain energy isn't quite happening. And so that's why for neurodiverse people, we have aspects of our brain that are over being overworked or overutilizing or underperforming. And it's different regions. So some regions are overperforming and others are underperforming and others are working just normal. So it's really fascinating what I've been learning. And so in this process of learning all of this, even though obviously I went down a very specific path with ADHD, what it comes down to that I found fascinating and maybe a little frustrating is that there are many things in here that can pertain to any neurotypical person, just how our brains learn. Okay. I will do a shameless plug real quick. If you have not heard of Lauren Waldman, she's the learning pirate. And she has a whole course on this. It's called Joining Forces with Your Brain. And she shares how brains learn and how to take advantage of that so you can create learning that genuinely helps and following through with that. Anyhow, we're not here to dive into how brains learn. I'm going to leave that for her to do, especially neurotypical brains. But we're here to dive into what we can do to help manage our neurodiverse brains when it comes to creating learning for others. So, although I'm going to share with you 5 specific tools that I find most beneficial, I want you to know when I say tools, I don't just mean physical things. It's physical, it's digital, it's mental, like strategy and perspective. And I don't want you to have this high expectation that these 5 things are like magical technologies that are going to produce wonders. That's not life how it works. And that's not what I'm going to be sharing. So just keep that in mind. Like, please don't get that high of, oh, this is going to be everything I need. We're all a little different, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit later. But because of that, please be open to other opportunities and tools. All right. So along with this, please know that even though I am a neurodiverse person and I have been studying on this for very long time in my life, and I am an L&D professional, I am not all-knowing being of all things neurodiverse, okay? Even ADHD. I mean, this is an ever-learning evolution. So I'm going to welcome, especially in the chat, anyone who has other tools or recommendations. I really want this to be an open, collaborative, communicative effort here. I'm obviously sharing with you what I have known to have worked, but by all means, everyone works a little differently. And so if you know of a tool or something that has worked for you and you want to share it, please do. I know everyone here would be most appreciative of that. All right, so let's jump in. All right, so the first thing that I have as far as a tool is very dependent upon your circumstances, but if you're able to, move your body. There are so many studies of connection between body movement and brain that you need to take advantage of that. And I know that's very difficult when you're having to be in an office and basically sit still. Us neurodiverse don't do well sitting still. If you see me, not just dancing there, but I'm jumping up and down a little bit, it's because I'm on a yoga ball. So you need to find a way to move, whether that is you're able to get up and walk around. If you have one of those nice ergonomic, desks that rises and lowers that you can at least, keep your body moving in that regard with the adjustable desk. And if not, at the very least, and I don't see mine right in front of me, and I apologize. I usually have my fidget cube around, but if not, I always have like this little, I don't know what to call it, a paperweight, but I'm always playing with it. Have something. You need to keep that body moving. It really helps. That's the stimulation, right? So we need that stimulation. We need to make that work in that way. Another thing that's great for a tool is the Agile Scrum board. I've also seen people use Kanban boards, and that's quite helpful as well. Essentially, the goal here is just to have something in front of you that you can see what's happening and the progress as it's coming along. So this is just an example. As you can see, you would have projects on the far left, and then you would have 3 categories: what you need to do, what's literally in progress, and what has been completed. And so you just move those things around. I have sticky notes all over the side of my wall here with that exact thing. And I have one that I use for my projects with work. It's called Azure Ops. And so I use that as well. And I love it. I can't live without it because our brains are not the most organized. We don't think linearly. Just so you know, we tend to, I don't know, I think of a scribble and loops and everything. That's how we naturally think. And so having this visual, that keeps things in sight, therefore it's in mind, is very beneficial. Having a notebook, whether that's lined or bulleted. Lined is a little bit more restrictive. It has its benefits, but I think if you're a neurodiverse designer, bullet can also be nice because it's just enough structure, but it's not confining. And so you can do a lot more with a bulleted journal. I literally use a notebook every day. I have it right next to me on my desk here. I know that many of us neurodiverse, as Dr. Palmer explained, we have what they call comorbid, which is we have additional maybe disorders or traits that conflict. That's where you have like depression and anxiety kind of overlap. OCD is one of those. And so again, we don't think very linearly, and then we might have this OCD overlap. And so keep that in mind, that having a notebook is very nice to help ourselves stay organized, and just it's for us. So I emphasize that because I know there's many neurodiverse designers out there going, but it needs to be perfect and it needs to look beautiful, and it needs to be in order of what's happening. You need to start practicing to free yourself of that. It's very beneficial just because we tend to forget things. And so at least having it right in front of us to reference to, if we have to step away or we get interrupted, is extremely helpful. All right. And then we have mindset. Now, this one's tricky because it requires a lot of balance. So you need that effort. You have to be willing to learn, to grow, to improve, to take action, okay, for yourself, for what you're dealing with in your work. Mindful meditation can definitely help with this. I highly recommend it. I do that every morning, in fact. Growing your awareness in how you learn and how you work. Using that as leverage to complete tasks. Find what works for you and really lean into that. But you have to push yourself, okay? This is not the opportunity to use your neurodiversity as an excuse. Unfortunately, the world doesn't fully understand us. And when we say the truth of things, I forgot this, or, I was going to do in this order, not that order, it tends to come as an excuse. And we have to be very careful of that. But you need to put in that effort. Okay. So regardless, I know it really sucks because we tend to have to work like 10 times harder than the neurotypical person, but the payoff is there. Now, on the other end of that spectrum is grace. So be kind to yourself, especially when things come up that are not in your control. And what I mean by that, especially, is when your brain decides to interfere. It really sucks. Your brain will pull the rug from underneath you, take the wind out of your sails. But when that happens, that's where you have to remember, and that's where the education comes in, what kind of brain you have. You already know why it works the way it works. You can remind yourself, or look back as to like how it came to this point that the brain interfered, and give yourself that grace. It is not your fault in that regard. And just recognize what it is. I would say take a deep breath and then do your best just to move on. And lastly, a timer. Practicing and keeping an eye on the clock. Neurodiverse, we tend to lack an executive functioning ability. So with executive function, you have time management. I will tell you, for us who are ADHD, there is no concept of time. I know that probably sounds crazy to those of you with neurotypical brains, but the reality is we only understand now and later. If you tell us something's at a certain time or 15 minutes from now, our brains just don't pull that information the way that a neurotypical does. And so having a timer helps us with focus. Being able to gamify what we're doing and how we're doing it is a way to help us create that hyper focus that may not want to appear when we really need it. Okay. I remember reading upon this individual that he had ADHD, among other things. And so at the end of the night, when he was done cooking, and, most of us, I hope, tend to like clean up after, he had a real struggle with that. And so he gamified that situation by pretending he was a spy, and he needed to make sure there was no evidence in the kitchen that he ever was there. I think it's hilarious, but if it works, like, why not? And so the hyper focus can tune in and the job can be done. So it's pretty neat. All right. So we're going to switch gears. So when it comes to designing for neurodivergent learners, here are 5 things that I specifically make an effort to incorporate in my learning. All right, so first, this may seem like a lot, but I try to cover as much territory as possible with the material that I create for the learner. The reality is everyone learns a little bit different. And I know science is getting there. It's not fully there, but I know even Dr. Palmer mentioned that the fact that I see our brains becoming more and more like a fingerprint. We just all have very different brains. They're very unique in what they're able to do, their limitations and functionality. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're creating, that everyone not only has different backgrounds and everything, but they learn a little bit differently. And when they learn a little differently, I don't mean learning styles. I'm just going to bring up the zombie in the room. There are no such thing as learning styles. There's what is called learning preferences, and everybody has them. It's not just neurodivergent people. We all have preferences on how we learn, and that takes place based off of location, the topic, the person giving the learning, or the format the learning is given. I mean, there's so many variables, but that combination of variables will push somebody to prefer in that moment to learn, more visually or through, hands-on. I mean, it just depends, but it changes every single time. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Unfortunately, it's kind of like a moving target you're trying to hit. And so that's why I try to cover as much territory as possible. I want that e-learning, I want infographics, I want the job aids, the podcast, and micro learning, anything and everything I possibly can cover to help them and give them an opportunity within there. I'm sorry. I was expecting that. The second thing has to do with designing. So making sure that your design is minimal. And again, even though I'm obviously pushing for neurodiversity here, this actually equates across over to neurotypical. Okay. So keep it minimal, keep it attractive. I will say the one caveat difference between the neurodiverse and neurodiverse and neurotypical is neurodiverse people tend to be highly sensitive people. And what I mean by that is that our senses tend to be stronger, or at least I would say more the what we're intaking tends to be stronger through our senses. And what I mean by that is whether it's visual or even audio. I guess the example I tend to use is that, if you put blue text in the back of the website, poor design, don't ever do that. But I know for most people, it's like annoying. It's this annoying thing when they see that. But for neurodiverse people, to an extent, that can actually cause pain. It's really, I don't know how else to explain it. It just internally, it can cause a bit of pain. I'll give you the example that I have. Mine tends to be a little bit more on the audio side. So being next to a car when it gets, the engine turned on, or, the siren coming down the street. Again, most people would just be, oh, that's annoying, it's temporary, whatever. But especially when I don't expect it and it suddenly happens and that loud noise, it's weird, but my receptiveness is the fact that it tends to cause me pain. Like it's just too overwhelming for me. So keep that in mind with your design, that maybe what you create, the normal person, the neurotypical would find it just a nuisance or annoying. And you're thinking, oh, I can bypass this. But for a neurodiverse person, they're highly sensitive. And so that may be a little more extreme for them to receive. All right. Speaking of audio. So if audio is being used, two things to keep in mind. It either complements the visual element or the visual element complements the audio. Okay, it's one or the other. And again, this is neurotypical included. It cannot be of equal balance. And sadly, I just saw a video the other day that had that. Like they were trying to emphasize the lyrics to the song that was playing because it had this great meaning. And yet visually, they were having all this text coming up, flying in, and you're trying to read it, but you're trying to pay attention, and they cancel out. So it's one or the other. In addition to this, when it comes to audio, make sure that you're giving closed caption options. Okay. Speed option, I'm guilty of this, but sometimes my brain can't handle just listening to an audio at its regular pace. I need to keep it a little more stimulant for myself. And I apologize if I'm being one of those dragging on this morning or this afternoon. But I need that speed option. It is helpful because it keeps me focused. Okay. Transcript option is also great. Okay. Because again, stimulant, I can only watch and listen so much. I need to hurry and jump, movement. And so having the transcription there is helpful as well. Of course, there's also the fact that our brains tend to wander. And so maybe we don't want to pause the video and go back. We can just pause, go to the transcript and make ourselves, go back and read what we have missed and keep going. So having all of that is very helpful. All right, this one's kind of a given, right? We all have this. Oh, everything needs to be interactive. Yeah, of course. But make sure it's interactive for a real reason. Okay, don't just make things, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I know I make fun. This is just me. I make fun that I have a toddler brain. That's what I call my ADHD brain. It's like a little toddler in my head. But make sure that what you're doing is for a reason, not just to purely entertain. Okay. I highly recommend that you make the interactivity as soon as possible. Okay. So you're not lingering there for really long periods of time without any movement. Okay. That it's done for a legitimate learning reason. You're actually affirming, confirming, or supporting information, and therefore that's what the interactivity is doing. And that it helps either create dots or I should say, and or connect dots. Okay. Neurodiverse, we tend to look things very different perspective. We may not always catch things. And so if the interactivity is going to be there, make sure it's actually helping us see things that maybe we didn't catch and making those connections, or at least helping us critically think to make those connections. All right. And lastly, learning should have the ability to allow for repetition. Okay. So simulations, giving an opportunity to safely fail is, I would say, a big one. And that the fact that it echoes real life, that is just absolutely huge. I tend to love the ages model. So that's attention, generation, emotion, and spacing. Now, in real life, for us designers, we can't always use ages. People tend to want us to create something that somehow we live in the matrix and we can just download, even though that is not how our brains work. How our brains learn hasn't quite expanded to the far reaches of learning and development. But until that happens, I know within the ages model, spacing is very helpful in that. The emotional piece is just that connection with the learning, right? Generation is the repetition, being able to do it multiple times over. Of course, and A being attention, having that focus there. But this is really big. I know this is not just a neurodiverse thing. This is actually all across the board with all brain types. You need to echo real life as much as you can, as closely as you can. You need that safety ability to go in and practice something over and over again till you have that almost second nature, right? That's just how our brains learn. We grasp at that. We're talking a little bit before with Edu about mentorship, and coaching and shadowing somebody, apprenticeship. This is what falls into that. Our brains need that repetition. So what happens in the brain, this is what's called neuroplasticity. In fact, Carol Dweck speaks about this in her book. So you have these synapses and you have the pathway that goes between the two when you first start learning something. And the analogy is like, it's just a dirt road. It's not much there. You're kind of winding or wearing it down by walking that path multiple times over. And then over time, it becomes a paved road, maybe a little country road. And then, a main street, a boulevard, a highway, a freeway, right? It gets up to that point. Because of what? Because of repetition, because you're doing that process over and over and over, the learning grows. Okay. And so the synapses there that are created in your brain get bigger, become more active, and therefore you don't have to, I guess, so heavily, rely on thinking about certain things. I'm sure there's many things in your life that you're thinking about, even just driving, you don't have to sit there and do every little thing. Your brain knows what to do at this point. Now it works backwards too. So when you stop doing something, let's say like playing the piano, over time, okay, it's not all at once, over time, that freeway is going to start dwindling down back into just nothing but a dirt path. So that's how neuroplasticity works. And just, I'm hoping this is already out there, but in case it's not, what Carol Dweck has done with her research is the fact that it doesn't matter your age. Neuroplasticity is always happening. So there were theories ages ago that, by adulthood, your brain doesn't develop anymore and you're stuck with what you have. And that's not the case. So I hope you all know that. But in case you didn't know that, that's the reality of it. So those are my tools. Those are my recommendations. And I apologize. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat, but I wanted to make sure I got through this for you all. I will open it up to any questions or curiosities or concerns. Let me see. I'm going back through the chat. Yes. I'm glad someone else has the multiple notebooks. How do I keep track of them? Oh boy. I actually only really use one, and I put everything in there. That probably sounds absolutely nuts, but I just have to make myself refer back to. Now I do make notes like along the edges and the margins, if you will, like knowing I'm going to be flipping back and forth, just to kind of give myself a hint that I'm going to come right back to this location to, find a specific piece of information. Otherwise, I keep them handy, and I guess I have them color coded, but nothing more extreme than that. I hope you don't lose them. But I have to have everything in hand, which sadly takes up space on my desk, but I have to. I don't have another way around it. Let me see. Yeah, time is definitely our enemy. I agree with that, Karen. Let's see, my fellow indie folks. Oh, I hope there's many of you on here, just because I'm a little biased like that, right? Yeah, clear decks are really important, and the transcript. That's really nice, having a tool like that, Paulina, to be able to put your transcript in, to have it read back to you. That's absolutely fantastic. And I agree with that. It can be really helpful, just to be able to process information. So very nice. Ayandamola, I have finished. I didn't mean to raise it. I wasn't sure how the time thing was going to work.
Yeah,
The last
no,
session.
it's great. I have just a very short activity for the people in the just for us to have an idea of how much they took in the session. And there's a comment that came in that someone said she's curious, or he curious, to know how many people can identify as neurodivergent. And I'm wondering if there are people in here who are not ashamed. I think after listening to a lot of information about neurodivergence, I came to see that I think I have a level of, I don't know what exactly it is. There's ADHD and all of those things, because many times when you're telling me a lot of things, it gets to a point where I just switch off. I can't take in too much information at a time. I'm also the kind of person whose brain processes so many things at a time. I'm just way ahead. I've seen, So I think all of us have a level of ADHD, or is it neurodivergence? Maybe it's higher in some people than the other. I think I'm a very restless person. I just see myself moving a lot and all that. So it's not something that people should be ashamed of. And that's the comment I have, about it. We all have different ways that our brains work. Some of us, our brains works faster than other people at a time. And because people can't relate with it, they make it look like we're not normal. But it's not a bad thing at all. So I have a poll here for us to answer. So if, for like today, based on what you have learned today, what did you used to think about neurodivergence, and now what do you think about it? Let's have it in the comment. What impression did you have about neurodivergence or ADHD and all of those, terms? And what do you think now? This is for everyone in the chat. And I'm going to share another one later too, for us to state how we intend to, okay, we don't have time for that. Let's just stick to this. What you intend to do. Maybe you can also find a way to answer it in here. With the information you've had today, what changes do you think you're going to make in your learning design based on, relating with people that are neurodivergent? Today I heard that when I'm using video and text or audio and text, one should be more while the other one is supporting. It's not that you have the same amount of audio and text, because you want to consider people that get easily distracted. When you're gamifying, you want to make sure that the gamification is really enhancing the learning for people. It doesn't get so much that it eventually distracts, So let's see what people have to say. And before we go, we are moving to the next session immediately after this. So as we know, as we've done since we started our first session today, we're going to leave this meeting so that this session is recorded, and then we can have access to it later and then come back in immediately. There is no break. We have actually, taken too much, and we have, great things that we're going to be learning. The next topic that we're going to be learning is going to be very, very interactive and very educative for us. So let's come back immediately. Okay. I used to think that designing was only for neurotypical people. Now I think that making design neurodiverse friendly will help everyone. Yes. So being neurotypical means people that are considered normal. They think, straight, normal. But people that are neurodivergent have excess of certain things, which I believe all of us have. So when you're designing your training, of course, you have to consider people that do not see things the normal way. Now, someone said, I used to think it is really something that you need to understand at a very deep level to be able to design suitable learning materials. But now I do know that with some small adjustments and better thinking, I can cater for neurodivergence. Absolutely. You don't need some very complicated tools to cater for people that are neurodivergent. And on this note, we have come to the end of this particular session. Please, let's appreciate Kristina with, our usual emojis and sounds. Let's appreciate her for, this beautiful session. I've learned new things today, and let's keep it coming. 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 Thank you so much for Kristina for this powerful
Thank you all for
session.
having me.
That applause was for you.